What do you make of the current situation between Iran and the United States? When you look at the way that the Iranians are talking about the war, Donald Trump is talking about the war, and the state of the Strait of Hormuz, and what is happening in your opinion? What when you sit back and look at the situation, what do you make of this chaos that you're witnessing?
I think Iran is dealing from a foundation of fact-based truth. Um, it's operating within the four corners of reality as dictated by its performance during the conflict between itself and the United States and Israel. They haven't overstepped their bounds. Everything that Iran has done is something that is logical. I mean, I'm not saying that people can support it. You could say, I don't support what Iran's doing, but it's a logical action based upon, what we know of Iran's capabilities. They're not claiming to be able to do things that they can't actually follow up on. That's the exact opposite of the United States. Donald Trump lives in a fantasy world, a fantasy world that is heavily influenced by, pressures emanating not from the region where the war was fought, but rather domestically with upcoming midterm elections. Donald Trump is seeking to paint a picture that is pleasing to American voters, but not necessarily reflective of reality.
Yeah. How do you see the new defense pact between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey? Because there are some sort of interpretations on the part of Iranians. It was so positive on the part of Iran. You see, the foreign minister, he speaks, the foreign ministry of Iran. It was, the reaction was so positive. Even the new head of National Security Council of Iran, he reacted positively. On the other hand, Israel, two of their ministers said that it's a threat, it's a Sunni threat for Israel. And Erdogan, we had Turkey talking about it. They say we are bringing, foreign minister of Turkey, Fidan, said that Iran has its own problems, but after all, we need Iran to be there with us. He didn't mention if Iran joins or not. Pakistan believes that all Muslim countries should come together. What is the perception in Washington, in your opinion, when they look at what's going on?
Well, I think nobody understands what exactly this pact is. I mean, that's, it's supposed to be a self-defense pact of collective self-defense, somewhat modeled on Article 5 of the NATO Charter. An attack against one is an attack against all. But, let's be straight up honest about that. Other than, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia having arrangements where Pakistan provides manpower to Saudi Arabia, there is no common doctrine. So people said this is the NATO of the Middle East. No, it's not. Where's their unified military doctrine? Can Saudi Arabian military units operate, with Turkish military units in interoperable fashion? If you put a Saudi battalion online and a Turkish battalion online next to it, can they coordinate their operations? Do they have the same logistics? Do they speak the same language? No. Pakistan, no. Pakistan has its own. So, their air forces don't know how to fight with one another. Do they have a unified air doctrine? Do they have the ability to ping, IFF codes off each other and not shoot each other down? So it's a lot of theory. One thing they say is that it doesn't abrogate any existing security arrangements. So how do you deal with Turkey and NATO? I mean, right off the bat. And then what about, an attack against one is attacking against all, but what about a conflict that derives from the aggressive posturing of any of the nations that are involved? What if Pakistan gets involved in a shooting war with India? Does that mean that Saudi Arabia and Turkey have to come to Pakistan if India strikes Pakistan in retaliation for something Pakistan does? Turkey right now is occupying, according to some interpretation, Cyprus. a European Union member. They're occupying Syria. They're occupying northern Iraq. If Turkey were to get involved in a shooting war with Israel over Syria, does Saudi Arabia come to Turkey's assistance? Is that self-defense? Does Pakistan come to Turkey's assistance? What about Saudi Arabia and its ongoing conflict with Ansarallah in Yemen? Is Pakistan and Turkey meant to come to the assistance of Saudi Arabia? This is a pact that has no meaning, none whatsoever. So I don't, it's maybe a step in the right direction, but which direction? Is it against Iran? They say no. They say Iran's not signaled out. As you said, the Iranians don't seem to be threatened by this. Is it against Israel? Well, they don't say that, but the implication is that. But here's the big unanswered question. How does this relate to the U.S.-dominated security architecture that's currently in place? Saudi Arabia has not divorced itself from the United States. So the last time I checked, Saudi Arabia is more beholden to America than they are to the Mecca Pact, which is what this is, the Mecca Pact between the three. Turkey's a NATO member. Is Turkey really going to go against the United States as a NATO member? This pact has no meaning, none whatsoever. It's gibberish. It's chaos. It needs more reflection. I mean, I was in Turkey and talking to people who are friends of the Erdogan regime, the different political party, but still sympathetic. Their focus was that Turkey should be aligned with Iran, Russia, and China. And this alignment is sort of taking Turkey to Turkey in the exact opposite direction. Who knows? Maybe there's some vision here. I have a hard time imagining them trying to cut Iran out of the picture. But when you take a look at it, it's a crescent basically designed to contain Iran. It's not a crescent to contain Israel. So I think this is just an action that took place because these nations are concerned about a vacuum being created by the collapse of American prestige in the region, and that they're afraid that other nations may seek to exploit this. Israel with its relationship with the United Arab Emirates. Oh, that's the other thing. What about the Gulf Cooperation Council? I thought they had a military component as well. Did Saudi Arabia withdraw from that? Again, this is a document that has no meaning, and with no meaning, it means it's not enforceable.
There are many points in what you've said, but let me start with the first point, which you mentioned about the Cyprus. I was in Cyprus. I know this. I know Cyprus, the northern part. I was in the northern part of Cyprus, which is under the control of the Turkish government. They're not mostly, all of them, they're Turkish people. They're talking Turkish. Their culture is Turkish. They have nothing to do with the southern part of the Cyprus. That's why you see the same thing. I assume that we can compare that to what's going on in the eastern part of Ukraine, which was the ethnic Russians, mostly connected with the Russian more than Ukrainians, if we can argue that. But in Cyprus, you see basically even the culture, the language, everything is Turkish. The currency is Turkish. Nothing. You see no, connection with Greece.
Correct, but here's the problem. I agree with you. I mean, I agree with you 100%. But what is Northern Cyprus's status under international law?
They have the UN. They have the UN between the two sides. UN,
Correct, but here's the deal. Turkey treats Northern Cyprus as an extension of Turkey. So when it comes to, for instance, exploring for oil and gas in the waters around Cyprus, Turkey says this is ours, and Cyprus says no, it's ours, and it interferes with Israeli, projections. And Turkey applies the same philosophy to the Aegean Sea, and so what happens? The point I was bringing up is, with Cyprus, what happens if they get in a shooting war with Greece over oil? And what if Greece decides to wake up one morning and conduct a preemptive strike against the Turks? I'm not saying it's going to happen, but what if it does? Does Saudi Arabia come to the assistance of Turkey, citing the Mecca Pact? Does Pakistan bring its nuclear arsenal to bear against Greece? And the answer is no, which means it's a meaningless pact. This is all I was pointing out. I wasn't saying that the Turkish presence in northern Cyprus was illegitimate. What I'm saying is that it creates a very complicated geopolitical problem set that puts Turkey at odds not only with Greece, but all of the nations of the Eastern Mediterranean. Remember, Turkey expanded its maritime border based upon a treaty arrangement with Tripoli, I think, the Tripoli government, that basically drew a line right down the middle. And that changes everything in terms of, oil and gas rights. France doesn't agree with it. Egypt doesn't agree with it. Nobody agrees with it except Turkey and that section of Libya. But it changes everything, and it creates friction that could lead to conflict. What happens if Turkey gets in a shooting match with France, which almost already happened once because of Libya? Remember that Turkish convoy making its way, and the French tried to interdict it, citing some sort of ridiculous, European Union, rule. And the Turks said, "You come any closer, we're sinking your ship." The French, "You can't sink us, we're French." The Turks like, "Do it." And what happens if you get in a shooting match? France has said they'll support Greece no matter what. So if Greece attacks Turkey, France comes on the side of Turkey. Now you got an intramural firefight involving NATO. Is Saudi Arabia really going to get in the middle of that? The answer is no. And yet, this pact is supposed to be about collective self-defense. That's what I meant. It's got no meaning to it.
Yeah. I think the point that you've raised is important because it was mentioned by Yemenis as well. They said, they said to Turkey, do you think that if Israel attacks you, Saudi Arabia going to defend you? It's going to be us defending you, not Saudi Arabia. But the problem with Saudi Arabia, Scott, is they're not that capable militarily if they decide to defend.
Thank you. The only thing that gives Saudi Arabia any punch is Pakistan. That's it. You take away Pakistan from the equation, Saudi Arabia's got nothing. Nothing. They spent a lot of money on weapons that if the Saudi Arabian pilots went up against a real air force, they'd be shot out of the sky. The Saudi Arabian army can't fight. They're just fat, out of shape, obese, non-fighting fools. They don't want to fight. They want to, sit there and wear uniforms and give themselves medals for appearing on parades, and and that's that. They don't know how to fight. They don't want to fight. That's why they have a relationship with the Pakistanis. You see, the Saudis buy their armies. They don't train their armies. So Saudi Arabia's got nothing. Israel doesn't fear, Saudi Arabian division, marching through Jordan, closing on it. They pray for that to happen because the division will defeat itself logistically as it approaches. So Saudi Arabia is just a non-starter there, which is, begs the question: what are they up to here? Saudi Arabia would be better off, trying to expand upon the rapprochement that existed, that was negotiated by China, to maybe not create a formal defensive alliance with Iran, but make it clear that Saudi Arabia and Iran have no problems, that there's no military threat, that that Saudi Arabia is done with America. But that's the other thing. I mean, this whole pact is meaningless so long as Saudi Arabia allows American forces on its bases. So as long as there's an American military presence in Saudi Arabia, this pact is meaningless. It means nothing. It's a joke. It's embarrassing. It's humiliating because it actually means absolutely nothing. That's my point.
I have never seen, or I have never read or experienced anything with the case of Iran toward Saudi Arabia. They have never seen Saudi Arabia as the enemy militarily. They're politically, maybe they have the tensions there, but never they thought that Saudi Arabia would be a threat militarily, or any of these GCC countries. The point is...
they're not afraid of the GCC at all. No one's afraid of the GCC. If there's anybody fatter than the Saudis, it's some of the GCC countries. Again, that only have militaries because they bring in mercenaries from abroad, many Pakistanis. Pakistanis have good soldiers. a lot of them, and everybody rents them out. But no, the idea that the Bahraini special forces are going to come in and scare the crap out of the Iranians, it's just a joke. And if you're waiting for Kuwait to field an army that has any capabilities, you're waiting in vain. None of them have the ability to fight. None of them have the ability to fight. They don't like fighting. They like spending money to buy hookers in London. They don't like spending money to train themselves in the art of close quarter combat.
I believe at the heart of this military pact or defense pact or security pact is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is asking Turkey and Pakistan coming together with them to announce. What is that? This wasn't the case before the war started, Scott. There is something going on inside Saudi Arabia, in my opinion, that they see the necessity of having this. You mentioned that's not gonna bring a lot of leverage for them, but after all, they're feeling that they need it. What is that?
It's because the United States has abandoned them and put them in a very difficult situation. It's because Israel felt the ability to attack Qatar without consequence, because the United States promised something that it can't deliver on. But it's not, I would say that it's less Saudi Arabia. Remember, Saudi Arabia did that strategic pact. Saudi Arabia already has a strategic pact with Pakistan. Already have it. It's sort of what they have here, but more. Turkey was always trying to get in on that. From the moment, it's Turkey that's been trying to get in on that. Turkey that's trying to shoehorn itself into the region. So I would say yes. While there is a need for Saudi Arabia to do it, and of course they played host to it. I think a big driving force for this was Turkey as well, because Turkey's constrained by its NATO membership. NATO no longer benefits Turkey at all. There's no benefit. Until the United States provides Turkey with F-35 fighters without consequence, without strings attached. When the United States gives Turkey F-35 fighters under the same conditions that it gives F-35 fighters to other NATO nations, then Turkey could say, oh yeah, we're a NATO member. But Turkey's not a NATO member. They're a NATO member in name only. Turkey, has its own thing going on. A large part of Turkey's defense priorities are outside of the framework of NATO. Turkey is looking at the reality that they're not going to be a European nation, that they've been basically blocked off from Europe, and that their strategic direction, the Erdogan / post-Ottoman direction, is towards Central Asia and looking east. And it's not a relationship of conflict. It's supposed to be a relationship of cooperation and economic, collaboration. And so, Turkey's doing it. But again, what about Turkey and Qatar? Nobody talks about that, because the Saudis and the Qataris don't get along. You know that, right? And you do know that Turkey has a military presence in Qatar, a significant military presence in Qatar that was supposed to serve as a deterrent against any Saudi military pressure on Qatar. How does that work out? What happens to the Turkish presence in Somalia? The Turkish naval presence throughout the Red Sea, what Turkey's trying to do in Sudan. So I think this is part of Turkey trying to co-opt the region, as opposed to Saudi Arabia trying to co-opt Turkey. I think Turkey's Erdogan is the real driver here, because he needs to be looking in this direction, and he wanted to latch on to an existing Saudi-Pakistani defensive pact.
There were, the Pakistani envoy went to Iran to send a message from the Prime Minister and Sim Munir in Pakistan to Iranians, and he said he was talking with Iranian Foreign Minister. He said, what we did with Saudi Arabia and Turkey has nothing to do with Iran. Iran is not the target of that.
Yeah.
And the perception, by the way, in Iran was the same. How do you see, Scott, the way that Saudi Arabia is trying? One part of the problem with Saudi Arabia is what you've mentioned. before the war started, the cooperation they had with American bases in their countries. Right now, you see, as an outcome of the war, they have been attacked because of those bases. And right now, they're seeking some sort of alternative for their security. But part of the problem is Saudi Arabia itself. For example, in Yemen, with Iraq, you don't see that sort of wisdom in the leadership of Saudi Arabia to bring down the tensions. Where does it come from, in your opinion?
Well, the big driver, I think, is NBS, and in his his desire to position himself as the next king of Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of dissent inside Saudi Arabia. I can't say that I know everything perfectly, but we know that NBS has orchestrated over time the arrests of a number of family members, princes, who posed a potential political problem for him. So we in the outside sit there and go, "Oh, NBS, he's the guy." But inside, I don't think he's as secure in his hold on power as he thinks, and he is posturing himself as the visionary, both in terms of what he can do for Saudi Arabia from a cultural standpoint. I think they're right now what Saudi Arabia 2030 is the new chant. Creating new cities and liberal opportunities for women. He's a reformer and all that, but he also has to be a security guy. And then always left unsaid is his relationship with the Ummah, the religious authorities. There's a deal with the devil that was made by the Saudi families, Sauds, with Wahhabism. That is a important part of this, and so there's a relationship there that requires Saudi Arabia to help export Wahhabism abroad as part of their foreign policy, and this requires Saudi Arabia to be more assertive in their posturing regionally, and so I think this is what what's driving this. He can't be seen as allowing the Zaidi movement in Yemen. I think I got that right. They're not Shia Twelvers. They're Zaidism.
Zaidi. Yeah.
Zaidi. Yeah. You can't let the Zaidi, who are deemed by the Wahhabists to be absolute apostates. These are Satanists. These are the worst people in the world. They're not even Muslim, according to the Wahhabis. So a lot of what's going on in Yemen is religious based, because Saudi Arabia can't be seen as peacefully coexisting with these people, especially when they thumb the nose at them by kicking out the pro-Saudi government of Yemen and installing themselves. This is a long-standing, religious issue, and the same thing with the Shia of Iraq. You can't have Shia militias sending, rockets into Saudi Arabia or drones into Saudi Arabia. My God, that can't happen. That's an insult to the Wahhabis. So a lot of the Saudi posturing is just driven by the absolute illogic of Wahhabist fanaticism. We don't think that, because when we look at the face of Saudi Arabia, we see Saudi Arabia 2030. But dig a little bit deeper into Saudi Arabia, and you realize there's a bunch of head chopping Wahhabist fanatics out there who have a stronger grip than one would think on the internal domestic political dynamic of Saudi Arabia.
Mike Huckabee said that President Trump has not just proven that he was willing to bomb them, he's mentioning Iran, but he's also willing to bankrupt them. It seems that in the eyes of the Trump administration, the continuation of the war would be the blockade on Iranian ports. That's going to work without fighting, without being in an active tit for tat. It seems that so far Iran has attacked multiple tankers in the Strait of Hormuz, but you don't see any sort of reactions from the United States the way it was before. And Scott Bessent 2 days ago said they're gonna, in the next 2 years, they're gonna introduce new pipelines that's gonna make the Strait of Hormuz irrelevant. Where is it? What is your understanding of the way that Donald Trump is continuing the fight?
we have to call a spade a spade. Who won the war? I'd like to hear your opinion. Just did the United States win the war, or did Iran win the war? You don't need. I think you would agree with me that Iran won the war.
Yeah.
Did they win slightly, or was it decisively? I think we could say decisively. I think this is the first time in the history of the United States that we lost a war. And what I mean by that is, people say, well, Scott, didn't we lose Vietnam? So war is an extension of politics by other means. So we lost the Vietnam War politically. But no one can make the case that the North Vietnamese kicked our ass. No. Every time we did a stand-up fight with them, we won. We bombed the crap out of them. We won every tactical engagement on the ground. But we lost because politically we couldn't sustain the conflict. The American people lost faith with the government over the conflict. Same thing with Afghanistan. Did the Taliban beat us in the stand-up fight? No. Every time the Taliban stood and fought, they died. It's just that, we didn't have what it took. We couldn't get the political support to go in all in, just like in Vietnam. And so we ended up fighting this half-assed war, and the American people lost faith with it, and we withdrew. But you can't say we were beaten. I mean, if Chris Donahue had gotten out, turned around out of the airplane, told the 82nd to disembark and go into Kabul and slaughter the Taliban, we would have done it. There would have been a damn thing the Taliban could have done. They couldn't beat us, but there was no support for it, no will to do it. America lost the will to fight. Iran, we want to fight. We can't. We got beat. And you say, well, Scott, we ran out of ammunition. That's not really getting beat to you. That means you don't understand anything about war. War is about systems. Systems functioning the way they're supposed to be. And a key thing about a system is that it's not just about how it operates at the cutting edge. It's about all the maintenance that goes on behind it, the sustainability. If you're going to go mow the lawn, don't brag to me about how sharp the blade is. If you're going to run out of gas halfway through and you didn't have a plan to get more gas in the machine, because now you're not mowing the lawn. The lawn kicked your ass because you didn't have a plan to continue this. We started a conflict with Iran that was predicated on things that just weren't going to happen. It showed a fundamental lack of understanding about the threat we were facing. We're going to kill the supreme leader, which we could do. And then what? Iran's supposed to collapse. And then we were placed with a government to our liking who will give up their missile program, give up their nuclear program, give up their relationship with Hezbollah and Ansarallah, and everything will be good. That's how we were going to win the war. Win the war with the first 6 bombs dropped on Iran. Well, we lost the war with the first 6 bombs dropped on Iran because we killed the supreme leader, causing Iran to rally around itself tighter than it's ever been in terms of support for the regime. So there's no chance of regime collapse whatsoever. And then we went ahead and lost the moral authority, because not only through assassination, because this was an act of perfidy. Many Americans tended to forget this, but I don't think the Iranians will ever forget that we were in active negotiations with the Iranians about the nuclear program that Donald Trump said was the most thing in the world. And the Iranians made significant compromises, and there was a deal going on an airplane via the Omani foreign minister to bring this thing to closure. And the Iranians thought that they had done something good, and then we bombed. It's an act of perfidy. It's a war crime. That's how we started this war, with a war crime. Then we murdered somebody, an assassination. That's another crime. And then we went out in the first day and we killed 168 students at the Manab school. Another crime, showing we don't have a clue what we're doing. We started a war that we lost on day one because it meant we couldn't win. But we kept saying we're going to do it. We changed our war plan. The other thing is, why are we changing our war plan every other day if we had such a good plan? It's because we didn't have a plan. We had no idea what we're doing, just making it up as we go along. And every time we did something, it just got worse and worse and worse and worse, expanding the conflict, dropping more bombs, firing more missiles, and causing the Iranians to send more missiles our way. And next thing you know, we ran out of ammunition. I'm sorry, guys. When you run out of ammunition, you lost the war, because war is about a system of systems. And the system that was supposed to sustain the conflict fell apart. And so the United States lost the war because we couldn't sustain the war, not because the American people gave up on the war. Hell, they didn't even know what's going on. They still don't even know what's going on because Donald Trump's been lying to them day one. This isn't Vietnam where the American people were in the street saying, bring our boys home. I mean, hopefully that'll happen. We get more people in the street. But that's not why this war ended. This war didn't end because the American people said, hell no, we won't go. In fact, as many Americans like, blow the crap out of these guys. Trump can't. He's out of ammo. And it's not just that, but the Iranians have seized the geopolitical, high ground, so to speak, by controlling the Strait of Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb. So they're strangling not just the United States economy, but the global economy because they're interlinked. So the Iranians have strategic dominance over the United States. They have tactical dominance insofar as the United States lacks the capacity to project meaningful military power into Iran. Iran retains the capacity to project meaningful military power into the United States military infrastructure and the support of the infrastructure of its allies. We can't defend ourselves against the Iranians. So the Iranians are doing more damage to us than we are doing to them. That's unsustainable. We lost militarily, but we also lost economically and politically because of Iran's ability to control the Strait of Hormuz and control Bab el-Mandeb, maintain relationship with Hezbollah, maintain a relationship with Ansarallah, and dominate the region militarily. It's called getting your ass kicked. We got our ass kicked. And this is the first time in history that the United States got its ass kicked. The first time. That's, and so this is where we're at right now. Trump can't admit it, can't acknowledge it. This is why we hear stupidity like the wall of steel. I think he just put out a tweet where he reiterated that we control the Strait of Hormuz. He said that with a straight face, by the way. We control it. What does he mean? Are American ships in control of the Strait of Hormuz? No, they're not even allowed to get near it without getting sunk or fired on. So how could we control the Strait of Hormuz? The wall of steel. But is it a wall of steel? No. How many ships do we have out there now? 16? I don't know. The number fluctuates plus or minus a couple every day. But it's not a wall of steel. Go look at the Arabian Sea and tell me how wide it is. But also recognize that we can't get any ships close to the Iranian shore because they have standoff missiles that would sink us. So we have to be standing off a long way. So there's a big gap there that we don't control. And so when the ships come, because what Trump's saying is with the wall of steel, we control everything that goes in to the Strait of Hormuz and we control everything that goes out of the Strait of Hormuz. So we control the Strait of Hormuz indirectly. Well, it's a nice theory, except the wall of steel doesn't exist. It's a wall of rusty little, ship outposts. But the shipping goes along, skirts the coast. Doesn't get stopped by the United States Navy. Comes in, skirts the coast. And it goes through the Strait of Hormuz. Only the Iranians control what goes in and out of the Strait of Hormuz. Are there some leakers? I imagine there might be one or two leakers to get through, but I haven't heard anything big about leakers. I think the Iranians actually hit everything with a missile. And insurance companies aren't going to allow people to try and get through, leaking. I think right now it's basically if you go through without our permission and you get hit, there's no coverage. And so you have to go through and get the money from pay the money to the Iranians if you want to get through, or the Qataris, or Omanis, I'm sorry. So Trump is just making stuff up. Where are we militarily? We can't do anything to Iran because the moment we do, they'll blow the crap. They'll terminate Kuwait's existence. They could terminate Bahrain's existence. They now have missiles that are guaranteed to bust through any defenses we have left in Jordan and bring a lot of harm to the Jordanians. They will take out the UAE. And this is why all the nations told the United States, stop. No more stupidity. It's over. It's finished. So Donald Trump has to deal with that reality. It's over. It's finished. But he can't admit that to the American people because then he'll be the first American president to get his ass kicked. He's Donald Trump. He can't get his ass kicked. He's got to kick ass. And so that's what he's trying to explain to the American people. I kicked ass. This statement, I sank their whole Navy. Why can't you take the Strait of Hormuz? You didn't sink their whole Navy, did you, naughty baby? Nope. Shut down their whole Air Force. No, you didn't, naughty baby. The planes are still flying. What about their army? Your biggest nightmare will be, and this might have been another reason why we stopped, is that we have several thousand troops in Kuwait that aren't ground combat troops. And if the Iranians were able to punch several divisions through, around fish length, through around Basra into Kuwait, Kuwait would fall in 3 days, maybe sooner. And all those troops that we have in there would be prisoners or dead. That's a nightmare for Trump. He can't protect them. So What does he tell the American people? We won. And I think that's where we're getting set up for the Declaration of Victory. We won. The perpetual wall of steel. We won because we have a wall of steel, and we're going to maintain this. But then the next problem is, can he maintain it? I mean, I'm not going to get into too many rumors about Abraham Lincoln, but you've seen the stories. It doesn't seem that all is harmonious on an aircraft carrier that's been asked to extend its tour. And I would imagine the same tensions exist on other Navy vessels as well. This is an unsustainable posture on the part of Donald Trump. Moreover, unless he gets things back in normal, he's going to lose the midterm elections. So I think you're going to see Donald Trump say, I won. I control the Strait of Hormuz. Scott Bessent's going to say, yeah, as long as we have the wall of steel, we don't have to worry about it. Plus, in 2 years, the beauty of the 2-year time frame? Trump's not going to be held accountable to it. It's 2 years from now. Trump won't be president. So, and you're going to see that in 2 years, in 3 years, things will get better. Trust us. Don't hold us accountable for the mess there is right now, because in 2 years, it's going to be better because of us. I mean, this is the stupidity, and I hope the American voter doesn't fall for it, but this is what we're seeing. A lot of posturing from a president who has the dishonor of being the first president in the United States history to get his ass kicked in a war.